the Global Consortium, uniting the world through education.
To our global audience, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Cerritos College is pleased to have with us here today the Olive Tree Initiative, based at the University of California at Irvine. The Olive Tree Initiative consists of a diverse group of students, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Druze, non-religious, from different ethnic and national backgrounds, nearly all the countries in the Middle East, who represent all main student groups dealing with the Israel-Palestine conflict on campus. The group's mission is to gather more first-hand information on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, citizen peace-building efforts in the region, the people, their cultures, and sentiments, and to develop constructive relationships between people who find themselves on opposite sides of the issues, Israeli and Palestinian issues. There are some faculty advisors here today. Dr. Paula Garb is the Adjunct Associate Professor of Anthropology and the co-director and co-founder of the UCI Center for Citizen Peacebuilding. Her academic focus is on the ethnic conflicts of the Caucasus, and she is fluent in Russian, having lived in the then Soviet Union for 17 years. Daniel Werenfeding is currently a PhD candidate at UCI. His research focuses on dialogue processes and conflict resolution, particularly in the regions of Northern Ireland and Israel-Palestine. Daniel is also an active member of the Center for Citizen Peacebuilding, among other nonprofit organizations. And Francine de France is Instructional Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences here at Cerritos College. She recently has begun a global initiative at Cerritos College and launched 2 new degree programs, Contemporary World Cultures and Global Studies, in an effort to prepare students to promote cultural understanding and communication in the global society. Now, I would like to introduce our host, Dr. John Haas, founder and director of the Global Consortium. Dr. Haas is an award-winning educator, researcher, and lecturer. He founded the Global Consortium in 2001. The Global Consortium is a network of global partners that share a common goal of bridging cultural gaps in our world by fostering dialogue throughout the globe on sensitive topics. The GC raises awareness of global issues to college students throughout the world, many of whom would not be able to have this opportunity if it were not for this program. The Global Consortium has the unique advantage of being broadcast to over 2.5 million college students throughout California, webcast on the internet, broadcast on local cable television, 3C Media Solutions, and interactively shown live to our partner schools, educators, students, and institutions across the globe. Recent guests on his show include Noam Chomsky, Dr. Judea Pearl, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, Lucy Nusabeh, and Louisa Benson Craig. Recent topics include the Israel-Palestinian conflict, the Ukrainian Holodomor, interfaith dialogues with the UN, and the torture and imprisonment of Burmese political dissenters. Dr. Haas has received numerous accolades for his pioneering work with global education, including a prestigious commendation from United States Congress, recognizing his work in promoting global peace, education, and understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. John Haas.
First thing I want to say, doesn't Mr. Bright have a wonderful voice there? I think we could give a round of applause for Mr. Bright. I just want to say thank you to all of our guests here today, and they'll be able to go around the line and introduce themselves. We just had a group here from Burma. We have a show coming up on Burma on Monday, and I've seen we've had some guests out in the audience now that I now recognize here, so I just want to welcome them. And I really want to defer to my dean, Francine de France. She's been really instrumental in making this all happen and introducing me to the OTI. And so we're really thrilled that we have all of our guests today. And so what we want to do is to begin with, I'd like to show in just a minute here, and I'll give Bernice the nod back there, a little video, a 10-minute video, I think, roughly, that will explain OTI. And Daniel said to me that I think if you show this video, that you will basically save 40 minutes of you speaking, and I know my students will be really happy about that. So anyway, we'll show the video, and I just want to let everybody know what the format will be. We'll watch the video. I have a couple introductory questions just to kind of stimulate the conversation. And we have some guests here I can see up on the screen. After a few introductory questions and answers, then what I will do is I'll open up the questions, and everybody can have a word today. You can ask any kind of question that you would want, and we'll see if we can pan this around the globe so that everybody is included here. One thing I would say is that we're here to respect other people's opinions. I have an office mate by the name of Dr. Gene Blackman, who's a very nice friend, and he always reminds me that we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. And he says we should do twice as much listening as we do actually speaking. And I think that's a good thing, especially when we're dealing with kind of hostile, sometimes hostile topics here. So I will talk to Bernice and see if we can run the DVD, and then I'll open up with some introductory questions today. Thank you.
The Olive Tree Initiative just started with a bunch of students on campus from various different religions, cultures, political views, backgrounds, came together, and they wanted to go and actually learn firsthand about the conflict that was going on in Israel-Palestine.
So students who are Muslim, Jewish, Druze, Christians, and other religions and backgrounds came together and came up with this idea that we were going to travel there as a group and see what's going on in the region from our own perspectives rather than what we hear from other people or the media.
Something people ask me a lot of the time is, oh, so you got to go on this trip for free? And my response is, nothing is for free.
I think there were times nobody wanted to say we thought it wouldn't happen, but they kept coming back to the table because they believed in it, and that's why it happened.
We exceeded my expectations entirely by raising the $60,000 to go on our trip. And it was a real hurdle to convince other people that it was something that could happen and should happen.
We introduced ourselves as students from UCI going on a trip independent of any organization. And that's how we made it happen.
Our main goal was to spend equal times in Israeli territory and Palestinian territory, so we really split up our days.
We went to Israel, and we also went to Palestine in the West Bank, the cities there. We went to Ramallah, we went to Bethlehem, we went to Hebron. We actually stayed in Jerusalem, the old city, and we went to Haifa and Nazareth and Tel Aviv, which are all Israeli cities.
At all these places, we got to speak to different people, politicians, government officials, civilians, just everyday people who have to live this conflict.
The students made a request that they get to ask all the questions in the meetings. That was one thrilling moment, to know that the students were desperate to be able to ask questions, had that level of inquisitiveness.
tragic that such a beautiful place could have so much conflict.
Most of the people, the majority of the people that we spoke to, do want peace and are living with each other and are neighbors door to door to one another.
Everyone feels connected to this place. Well, being there, I felt like it was my home, you know? It's easy to feel connected to it.
And I think that particularly what we learned coming back from this trip is that there isn't two sides of the conflict in order for you to be able to say that I'm pro one and not the other. We just saw that there was such a variety of opinions.
There's a lot of different viewpoints over there, a lot of different perspectives. The settler in Ariel has a different perspective than the settler in Gush Etzion. You know, there's people in Bethlehem have different perspectives than the people in Ramallah. So it's really complex. It's really difficult to understand.
For me personally, my high point during this trip was every morning I would walk down. When we were in Jerusalem, I would walk down to Al-Aqsa, the Dome of the Rock, for prayer. And as I was walking down, I saw Christians going to church, and I saw Jews going to the wall, and I realized that we're all going for the same purpose, to worship and please our Lord. And that to me, in one city and in a peaceful environment, for me that was most pleasing. I think it was awesome.
I learned that differing viewpoints actually teach you a lot about your own viewpoint. And having these different perspectives in the group opened my eyes to that, and it taught me a lot about the other side and this perspective that I had in the beginning.
I learned that it was okay to disagree, and it was okay to not have the same viewpoint as everyone else, and you can still have a discussion and not hate each other or be discivil to each other.
I really loved how everyone in the group felt comfortable to hold their positions and express those positions, and they were absolutely different among our group. There were varying positions, almost as varying as they are in the region.
At the beginning, one of the hurdles of the trip was that people believed this is a kind of a peace-building trip, where even the students came in and made clear, and I loved it from the beginning, we're not here to change our opinion. And I confirmed that and say, no, I don't want you to change your opinion. That's not why you're going on the trip. Peace building doesn't mean you go and afterwards you're all best friends and big buddies, you know, and you all love and kiss each other. It's about how this trip encourages you more learning and knowing about a situation. That encourages the dialogue, and that more dialogue and this more kind of communication then may lead to better understanding and conflict resolution. But this is an optional thing.
Initiatives like the Olive Tree Initiative are helping to bring back new ideas and new, dialogue to campus. But I think the vast majority of the campus would fall within what we would call moderate. And unfortunately, like the media outside, they like to focus on the extreme viewpoints because that's what sells. No one wants to hear about students on campus making peace. They want to hear about students fighting and students, disagreeing with each other.
Again, it's like an academic environment. It's for an exchange of ideas between people who have differing opinions. And I think if you can't have these academic discussions, this academic dialogue with differing opinions on this campus at a university, then where are you supposed to have this discussion?
And I think UCI is full of intelligent people, and they're really progressive campus. And I think we can be known for being a campus that really did something amazing instead of, just another campus that protests about Israel and Palestine.
This trip was truly the epitome of a scholarly adventure, I guess you can say.
It was so profound and so eye-opening, I can't even put it into words.
Just a few days into the trip, I realized how important this is and how much responsibility I should be taking to make sure that we actually take this back to campus and take this back to the people and show them what we've done.
Our main goal is to get other students involved. We don't want to just limit it to just us who went on the trip and got the experience, but we're hoping to have another trip with new students who can go as well, and to also have open dialogue here on campus.
The hardest barriers are out of the way now. We already figured out how to raise money and how to deal with bureaucracy and things like that. And now it's up to the next group of students to take initiative and become the new leaders of the next, OTI Part 2.
It kind of reaffirms the idea that I had that, a group of people can really change the world, or a group of people can really make a difference in this world if they want to.
Every single one of these students is a leader. These are students whose lives and actions from here on out on this campus and beyond are going to make a huge difference everywhere they go and have an effect on the rest of the world.
Every single speaker we heard when we were there, whether it was on the political side or a more personal side, whether they were negotiators or whether they're just civilians, they all seem to want the same thing. And they all seem to advocate understanding. And I think that's very important, because when you bring it back to campus, when you bring it back to the United States, that is essential. Without understanding, there is nothing.
All right, why don't we just go around? We can start over there and just make a little semicircle here and just introduce yourself, and then we'll start with some questions.
Good afternoon. It's my intro music, so. My name is Ali Malik, and I'm a fourth-year history major at UCI, minor in religious studies, and my focus is mostly American history, but I've done some classes. I've taken some classes in Middle Eastern history, and I'm a member of the Olive Tree Initiative, and I'm glad to be here at Cerritos College, and I'm going to pass it to Paula Garb.
I've been introduced, and I teach conflict resolution, anthropology. I study how people in different cultures fight, but mostly how they make up.
My name is Tzvi Raviv. I'm an advisor for the Orange County Hillel, the Jewish Student Union. That's it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sally. I'm a fourth-year political science major, anthropology minor, and I'm also working on a Middle East Studies certificate. I am currently the president of the Middle East Studies Student Initiative.
Hi, my name is John.
I am Daniel. I'm a political science graduate student, and I'm glad to be here and get your questions soon.
I'm Shannon Shibata, and I'm the director for the Center for New Diplomacy, which is based in Israel, so that's where I live.
Hi, I'm Sharus. I'm a recent graduate from UC Irvine. I double majored in international studies and political science, emphasizing the Middle East, and I'm really happy to be here at Cerritos College today.
Hi, my name is Omar Bustami. I'm a senior at UC Irvine, and I study civil engineering and political science, two unrelated fields. And I'm going to hand the mic to whoever wants it next.
Shannon has two mics. So are we ready then? Yeah. The questions out here? All right, I devised a couple of questions, and I think I'll just throw out the three questions. That way you guys can digest it a little bit and think about it, and you can take them any way that you'd like. But anyway, I've heard rumors that at UCI there has been a history of tension between Jewish and Islamic groups on campus, including allegations of anti-Semitism from speakers and threats to student safety. All right, I've looked at a lot of different blogs, and there was some discussion. The second question that goes along, how did the Olive Tree Initiative come about, and what were the goals and aspirations? And number three, what were the hurdles, economic and otherwise, of getting 14 students to the Holy Land? Security issues, things like that. So I thought I would just, I think it would be very good for our students here to have a little basic understanding of things that go on at UCI.
To address the first question about tensions on campus, there's been a history throughout UCI's history of activism on campus, like a dynamic student activism on campus. And so you'll see upcoming, this week is week 4 for us. We're on a 10-week quarter. Week 7, the MSU, the Muslim Student Union, we put on this kind of Palestinian Awareness Week, or whatever you want to call it. Each year it takes on a different title. It's unique to each year. So this year, the title is going to be Israel and the Politics of Genocide. And it's a very controversial topic, right? But as Shahruz mentioned in the video, if a university is not a venue, an avenue to discuss these issues and to have critical self-analysis and discussion, then where else should we have it? So the MSU use the campus to spread ideas, different ideas that aren't really available to your average Joe. And so the tensions on campus, I think initially, I wasn't there a couple years ago, but it's been about 7 to 10 years since the MSU has put this program on. And I believe initially there was some tension on campus, but I haven't seen that in the past 3 or 4 years.
We didn't have many things before then. We could pass the mic on and work on that while you're talking.
Hello?
Go ahead.
All right, sorry, I didn't mean to break your microphone. This is my first time here. I feel really bad. I just wanted to go ahead and elaborate a little bit on what Elise said. And UCI has been in the news. It's been on national news, CNN. It's been on blogs, like Dr. Hart said. And we have very active student groups on campus. There are people who feel very passionate about this issue. It's a worldwide issue. People on different campuses all around the world are very passionate about this issue, and UCI is no different. So you have the Muslim Student Union, you have Halal, which is a Jewish student union, you have Ant Ears for Israel. These student organizations are very vocal and very active. So you'll have a IFES, which is the Israeli Awareness Week. You'll have MSU doing the Palestinian Awareness Week, which, like Ali said, is coming up. And then you'll have different discussions, different speakers who will come out on campus. And you'll see a very active student community that's there. But like I said, I double majored in political science and international studies with an emphasis on Middle Eastern studies. So a lot of my classes had to do with the Middle East. A lot of them focused on Israel and Palestine. And the dialogue that we had in class was very civil. You know, you'd be able to share your ideas without really feeling threatened about what someone's going to do to you or what someone's going to think. You know, it was very open. And I just want to reaffirm that there is an exchange of ideas that go on, and there are passionate speakers who come on campus and who will make you feel angry, you know, make you feel passionate about an issue. But at the end of the day, I really feel like it's important to have dialogue, which is why we came together and formed the Olive Tree Initiative to form this activism on campus into something positive, into something where we can sit down and talk about it without really getting angry with each other, without calling each other names, and without, you know, being discivil to one another.
Last year was the first time I was in UCI for like the week, and I'm all in favor of freedom of speech. It's a very important thing, but I think once you go to the border when you accuse the Jews for the 9/11, I think that's passes the point of like freedom of speech, or when you bring like American flag with the Star of David. For me as a Jew, that's a symbol of anti-Semitism. So freedom of speech, yes, but you need to be careful not to cross it to more hatred speech.
So you saw one thing that we are really proud of is we don't have one opinion. So if you haven't picked that up, you know, we have 14 or more people with different opinions. And I think this is one of the challenges and some of the strength. I talked to Professor Haas and he said, you know, Cerritos College is an amazing place and you have a lot of passionate and different student groups, but he said there's not much a big of a Jewish population on this campus on here as there is at UC Irvine. So I think that's something that we are, you know, some people call it a challenge, that there are different organizations with different passions that also are kind of, you know, part of a major conflict in the region, in Israel and Palestine, but also I think it's a chance for us that UC Irvine is one of the few places that you actually have a lot of these student groups coming together and be passionate about. And I think the Olive Tree Initiative is a consequence out of that and finding another way to deal with that, finding another way of kind of dealing with this issue. You know, there's demonstrations which are good, there are emotions which are good, there are certain campus groups concentrating on one side or the other, and the Olive Tree Initiative was then built to kind of bring things together and see, you know, we are very passionate, have different opinions. Let's talk with each other, but also find out what's really going on there. You know, that's another, I see many of you guys here probably have come from, many might have grown up in California. I've grown up in Germany, so it's always different when I hear people here in California talk about Germany or me having grown up there. So it's this thing of, it's good to go sometimes to the place and see really how the people living there deal with the issue. And that was basically the idea of like, you know, we have Google, but let's go down and check out what's going on. So very basic, and then the stress began of getting everything started, raising the money, and deciding with a big group of different people what to do and where to go.
Sorry, and it's also not to say that all of the students at UC Irvine either fall on, oh, I am pro-Israeli or I am pro-Palestinian. There are also many students who don't fall strongly in either of these categories, and I don't think it's fair when people categorize the campus as either being pro one side and against the other. And one thing that I really love about the Olive Tree Initiative is that I get to speak with all these different people who would different opinions and thoughts, and I got to learn from them. And if I didn't have this, I would have been probably too afraid to speak with all these different kinds of students from either the Muslim Student Union or Anteaters for Israel, because of, oh, the media said that there was this rally and the Israeli pro-Israelis and the pro-Palestinians started to shout at each other, and they were chanting this and that. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, I want to stay away from these people. I don't want to be involved in any kind of conflict. I'm just going to keep to myself. But the Olive Tree Initiative was really an outlet for me that has helped me grow tremendously to learn more about myself and about the views of others.
All of our work in the beginning really had to do with making all of the different organizations feel like you know, this was their project. And when we invited them to come and talk, we, Daniel and I and another undergraduate student, were really aware of how difficult it had been up until that point to bring people for any sustained conversation. And it was just around this idea of going there together that brought people to the same table. And what was really gratifying for me was in the very first meetings, practically from the first meeting, the common ground that everybody shared was, how can we make this trip so that the Jewish students feel safe in the West Bank? So what can the pro-Palestinian students do to make them feel safe? And vice versa, what could the pro-Israel students do to make the Arab students feel safe? And we knew we could do this trip from the very beginning because of that shared concern for each other's safety.
Hey everyone. I would just like to go ahead and agree with everything that everyone here said. Definitely about the idea that people have a tendency to express their opinions, but it doesn't necessarily represent personal issues, I guess you could say, between the students of differing ethnic groups on campus. And I guess you guys may have been able to pick up from what everyone's been suggesting, that most of this so-called tension really occurs for about a 1 or 2 week period in the year when these different student groups will put up their events. And it's kind of an interesting question that has a bit of a loaded aspect to it, because it tends to delegitimize the actual point that the students are attempting to convey when they have these presentations. There have been like a lot of, I would say, very reputable speakers that have been brought to campus by both, you know, different groups, and a lot of times, I guess what's perceived as tension is kind of just more a shock that's taken at the fact that this stuff is actually happening in Irvine, quiet Irvine in South Orange County. And as, you know, a senior at UCI, I think, and not to brag, I think I've seen and witnessed more pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian weeks than everyone else here. And I reacted exactly the same way that Sally did at first when I was like, oh my God, what is this? But looking back, I tend to have taken a different point of view, that what an opportunity to experience a campus which protects the rights of people to free speech, and you can witness something like that occur. And I think that without that proactive, you know, approach that the students have been taking for so long, we wouldn't have an initiative like this, because this is essentially a response to that, to create some type of a synthesis, that you had people on one side trying to express their opinions, people on the other trying to express their opinions, and then we're kind of the people that are like, oh, well, it's okay to disagree, but at least let's listen to each other. And I think it's just, you're kind of witnessing a process take place, but hopefully it grows more in the future too. Please go.
It's interesting because the concept of exporting conflict to other areas, a friend of mine from Nablus went to England recently and was brought to the House of Lords. And he was handed a list of all the pro-Israeli lords and all the pro-Palestinian lords, depending on who he wanted to meet with. And he's sitting there looking at the list going, are you serious? You've exported my conflict over here? And this is sort of one of the things that I'm really proud of UCI for actually getting past, because advocacy is great and it's important, but academic pursuit has got to take in context and nuance and complexity. And that's something that you got to taste and touch and feel. Like Daniel said, you can't see it on Google, and I mean, you can watch somebody drive a car and get into a car accident, but unless you've actually gone through an experience where you can feel it, it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different dimension. So I think that this is where it's really important that academic pursuit also needs to take in a variety of views, and not just about advocacy, but about education, about 3 dimensions, about being with the people and having a cultural study. And this is what I want to encourage you guys to also do, is go out there, taste it, be a part of it. Don't just watch it on a TV screen, because that only gives you a second, a minute. And that's it.
I would say, I mean, the very nature of the conflict is something, it's an emotional experience for a lot of people, and it's very deep for a lot of people. And it's controversial, it's inherently controversial, so it's going to bring up controversy. And you're talking about issues where people are dying, and it's a serious issue, and it's not getting the attention. This room right now should be filled with people, right? It should be filled, because the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is very central to much of the conflict in that region, why people are upset in that region. And it's, in order to bring attention to that subject, sometimes you need controversy. You need people you need like an impetus, like something to drive people. And I think the fact that we have the Olive Tree Initiative, I think it's in direct consequence to the activities on campus, the controversy on campus. Because without that, people wouldn't care. I mean, apathy is so pervasive on our campus and in our society that people just don't care anymore. They could care less about issues that happen across, I mean, just go down 70 miles south of us into Tijuana, and how many of us go there on a monthly, on a yearly basis at least, and visit, who aren't of the Latino descent? Like myself, I don't go, I feel like a hypocrite almost. But we need that impetus. So what MSU tried to do is try to bring that spark, that energy around the conflict, and it tried to introduce ideas that people weren't thinking about, and that for some are offensive. But the fact is that we have to get over being offended by anything that maybe questions our beliefs. And like I learned that on the Olive Tree Initiative, that yeah, I can hold a conversation with Svi, and he can ask questions about Islam, and I won't get offended, because there are questions that need to be addressed. Are you guys all terrorists? You know. We spoke at Fountain Valley High School, and I asked the students, you know, the first question I asked them was, or actually we had a question and answer session, and I asked them, when you look at me, what do you see? And you can hear taristo and like stuff, and that's fine. Like you can say that, and the whole point is I can come out and I can explain these things to you. So without that controversy in the beginning, I think people just don't care, and that's sad. So sometimes you need that spark, you need that energy behind these issues. So sorry for talking too much.
Anybody else before we go on, please? Sure.
Kind of to respond to Shannon and Ali's comments, another observation that a lot of you may have noticed is that you kind of have 2 revolving issues right here. One, the actual conflict which is occurring in Palestine, Israel, and another issue which is sort of a local campus so-called tension, I guess, that's like going on at UC Irvine. So then it may lead you to ask yourself, which one of these problems is this group tackling? And I think that the group is for the campus community to understand each other better, but we realize that that's not going to occur until you understand the situation and the conflict better. So I think it was just more of like, analysis on that. But yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Any other thing? I think one of the things, I did a lot of reading last night here, and the expressions, the impressions, try to read up on everybody before I showed up here today. And Daniel, one of the things I found, you were talking about all these hurdles to actually making, you had the idea, it seemed like things were coming together, and you had all these hurdles. And I was just wondering if you could explain to everybody here, and we could jump in here, what were some of the hurdles to get this thing going?
Okay, I have 30 seconds to tell you hurdles of a 1.5 year meetings. I don't go on examples because there are examples sitting here. We are all different, we have all different things. So the idea was we're going on a trip together, and it's not a usual trip. I mean, it's our trip, so we have to make it ours, meaning everybody kind of put forward, where do you want to go, what do you want to see, who do you want to talk to? And just by doing that, then you have people who have been there, there's the hurdles, kind of the difference between what we want to do. Yes, we wanted to go to Gaza, nobody could go to Gaza when we went there, Yes, we want to go to places that rockets go down to show the other side as well. Maybe not a good idea to convince parents to send their kids, in places where rockets go down. So, I mean, there's kind of things about, okay, where do we go? However, this is important in perspectives. So how can we make sure to get the Gazan perspective, to get the Israeli perspective from Sderot, one of the cities, without, having to go there and being in danger, which, hey, I mean, I told the parents I bring them all back alive, so I want to make sure that's happened. And so these are issues. And so we basically decided we try to go where we can, but sometimes we could not go everywhere. I mean, we try to, I think we achieved quite a bit, but we made sure we get these perspectives. So we invited people to speak to us who came from places like Gaza or Sderot and all of that. So this is an itinerary issue. Then, I mean, don't want to kind of bore you, but it sounds like easy to raise a lot of money. I mean, sometimes it's easy to raise a lot of money if you have one constituency and you do exactly what they want you to do. But raising money for a group that is very different and has like a lot of things that you like them to do, but a lot of things you don't like them to do, is not that easy. So kind of finding that and raising, for our trip was $65,000, and we did not get any support by the university because at the time, the State Department had a travel advisory not to go to the region, so UC Irvine, being a state school, could not support us. So we had to raise it basically by private donations and people and centers and help of that. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues on that way, but I have to say, in this whole package of issues, you actually learn to get to know each other very well. And we had to learn to compromise, but also not compromise our thoughts and what we wanted, but kind of finding ways to do that together. And this wish to go together on this trip, I mean, not dumb it down and say, okay, let's stay in Irvine and watch a video from each side. I mean, like trying, pushing for the things we could do, but also understanding that not everything is not, it's not an ideal world. Not everything is possible, but how can we maximize what we saw and did? And we had a crazy program, and I told them and said, are you sure you want to do that? We had 3 to 4 speakers a day. So like it's about having 4 classes a day, and they're like, yeah. I don't go in detail, but I mean, it was tiring at times, I mean, if you have that like a whole week of 4 or 5 classes a day, and you're in a cool another place and want to do all the things you can do there and see there. And it was Ramadan, and our Muslims, some of the Muslim students on the trip, they were not eating and drinking during the day, and we were going to the desert. And I mean, I don't go into details. I may have already done that. So ask us questions afterward if you we really want to engage with you, and we're glad to share.
Let me ask you before you turn it. Is it true that you rejected some people's money?
Okay, there was some issue.
I didn't name any names.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
The money issue is sometimes important. Money is we needed money, but sometimes money, if it's connected to some group saying, it's not going to happen without, if that money is coming in. And we're living in a political context. And this conflict is political. So some people always think when you get money, you get ownership. If it's true or not, it's like, oh, that person and this and that, is supporting it. So we made a decision saying we want to really raise that money in a way that we get the buy-in by our campus community, by the wider community, but not put people off, without even listening and seeing what we do and saying, oh, this trip was because some funders who controversial, were involved, this trip is this way or that way. So we really made sure, we get money from local support and in a way that it did not really allow people to put us in one corner or the other, which we are not, but that's sometimes a reality of accepting money. You also accept the people this money is coming from, and people from the outside, they don't really care how the reality is sometimes. They're like, oh, we heard you got money from I don't name names, but you get money from this or that, and you get money from the Democrats or from the Republicans, oh my gosh, you must be Democrat or Republican.
I'm cheap. I take money from anybody. I don't Any other hurdles that you guys wanted to? Well, let's go out to the. Let me ask you this whole idea. What you thought you were going to get by going to the Holy Land, and what were some of the ideas before you went? And we'll open up questions about what you found after.
Well, as a group, we kind of sat down for a whole entire quarter, which is 10 weeks, and we talked about a little bit of the history, we had discussions, and we tried to cover as much ground as we could before we actually went to the area. And what we realized was I wish we would have done a little bit more actual dialoguing pieces, because once we got there, it was literally like all these issues right in your face, so you're reminded of everything, and you're talking with each other day and night, and you're having discussions, you're arguing, and you're having these really intense debates, and it's really tiring, in addition to what Daniel had put us through, which is like literally getting up at 9 a.m., going out until 6 p.m., coming back, eating, and then debriefing for like 3-4 hours, going to bed, and then doing it again the next day. So it was very intense. I wouldn't have done it any differently, maybe a couple extra days to spread it out, perhaps, but it was very eye-opening because you got to see both sides, truly both sides. We spent as much time in Israeli territory as we did in Palestinian territory, and we tried to balance it out with the speakers as well. So we got to talk to negotiators from both the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. We talked to advisors to the Palestinian Authority. We talked to advisors to the Israeli Prime Minister. We really got insight that we wouldn't have been able to get without going as a part of a group from UC Irvine, and without going as a part of the Olive Tree Initiative, which we did. And it was like I said in the video, the epitome of a scholarly adventure. Being a Middle Eastern Studies major, emphasizing on that, going here and talking to people and actually seeing what I was reading in the books and seeing from my own eyes what was going on, not just what was filtered through the news, because what's filtered through the news is absolutely different than what's going on there. You only get a snapshot, and that snapshot cannot even begin to describe the different nuances that are there in the area. When I went, you would think, oh, okay, an Israeli is X, Y, and Z. But when I went there, I saw the multitude of different ideas, different thoughts, different personalities. You would sit down and you'd have a whole table filled with people who believe in a two-state solution, but every single person's two-state solution was different than one another. And the same was on the Palestinian side too. So it was a very multifaceted community, very multifaceted society of people, and you don't see that through the news. You don't see that in your textbook. You see different points of view, but you don't see the people who are supporting these political parties, these political movements. And it was very eye-opening being able to talk to them and being able to ask them questions, no hold barred. It was very empowering for the students, and it was more than I could have asked for, to be completely honest.
And for me, my senior honors thesis, one of my senior honors thesis advisors always says to me, 10% of what you learn in class is important, and the other 90% is important, but you have to go out on the field in the real world and find it yourself. He says that the most valuable education you could get is outside of the classroom. The classroom is kind of supplementary to the real life experiences that make you who you are. And everything that Shrew said was absolutely true. And you have your textbooks in class. I mean, I'm a political science major. I've learned about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but I've learned it from authors who write in a certain way because they want me to feel a certain way when I finish reading their book. But being in the region, we were all able to meet with the actual people that everybody forgets about when they write their books. And that was absolutely very important.
The last really quick thing, Socratic learning method, being on the field. This is what makes this program so different, is the fact that not just that people went to Palestine and to Israel, both. It was the fact that how it was stacked, and this is where Daniel and Paula and the students did a really good job. Psychologically, we take in information in a certain way. The way we process information is interesting, because when you cross borders daily, constantly, instead of doing Palestine for a week and then Israel for a week, that's processed differently than if you're crossing a border every day, 3 times a day, because you can't get stuck in a paradigm. you have to keep switching feet, switching gears. And then information can start to slip in to preconceived notions. And this is where the program was different. The fact that you guys, people like you, who maybe, how many of you guys have been in the region before? Raise your hand. None. Wow. Okay. So imagine, sweet. So with you guys not having been before, realizing that you can have an impact, how? By being an emissary. People can't cross borders anymore. There are boundaries. There are borders. So these individuals were able to cross and to speak to people and pass messages from one side to another. And the thing is that mythology has been built on both sides in ways that are unbelievable. You would go to the Palestinian side, and the Palestinians would go, man, you know, the Israelis, if I went to Israel, to West Jerusalem, they would bury me in sand up to my neck, and all these kinds of mythologies. And the Israelis are like, if we go to the Palestinian Authority, then this is what's going to happen to me. Over time, when there's separation, mythology can build. And honest brokers are so important to be able to cross the borders to tell the story and to remind people of what's happening on either side. And that is where it's powerful. That's where education and the Socratic learning method makes you a part of history. So that's what I think of OTI.
Okay. Are you guys ready to take questions now, or do you want to? Yes. Yeah, I want to take questions. Dr. Horowitz, are you there? I'm assuming I can see you.
Hi.
Hi. I just want.
Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah. We want to show how deferential we are here at Cerritos College. So before I ask all of my students, I just wanted to kick it over to you and ask your group here, would you like to ask a couple questions of our guests today, and then we'll come back to Cerritos College.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just wanted to, on behalf of the students here at Ohio State, thank you so much for making this available to us here in Central Ohio. And I think I'm going to open up the floor to my students in a Living Jerusalem seminar where Muslim, Jewish, and Christian students tackle the tough topic of Jerusalem from multiple perspectives.
Right, well, I'll go. Hi, my name is Jasmine, and you talk about, I guess, the opinions, when you go over there, the opinions that are forgotten by the media and by news, and I just want to know, what are those opinions? Obviously, it's the middle ground and not the two extremes, but what are the opinions, I guess, on a whole?
Good question. I think for me, what was eye-opening was that being in Jerusalem, in particular, the most religious people I met and that I saw weren't involved politically at all. They didn't care about political ideologies. They weren't, unless their holy sites had some political influence. And so, what we assume from being here is that religion is like the center of this conflict, that Muslims, Jews, and Christians can't get along over there, that they're at odds with one another, that they're complete enemies. But when it comes to religious ritual, they're all praying, they're worrying about their prayer and about sincerity, about being sincere. But so for me, it wasn't about religion, and that's what I got from being there in Jerusalem, is that the conflict was more political. It was more about basic needs, about basic human rights, than about religion. Because if you were to remove religion from that area right now, so Jews were no longer Jews religiously, Muslims were no longer Muslims, and Christians were no longer Christians, there would still be a conflict there. People would still be fighting about basic needs, right? Basic water, food, human rights. And so for me, I developed that understanding from being there.
To answer your question about opinions and what types of opinions we saw over there and which ones are and are not being represented, one of the things that I kind of observed when we first got there, we actually went to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and we met with a professor who had done a previous sabbatical at UC Irvine, and he invited a number of students that were attending the Hebrew University to come and sit in with us and kind of just told them, go ahead and start rapid firing at each other. And they were very diverse. Some were Palestinians with Palestinian identity, some were Israelis, some were Israeli Arabs, and there were moderate Israelis, moderate Palestinians, extreme Palestinians, extreme Israelis. There were about 15 students, and then, yeah, but each kind of general opinion was sort of represented by this group, and he just said, start firing at each other. And within like 1 minute, it got so heated up. And then all of us felt incredibly awkward because these people are like shouting at each other, and some guy's like, a missile came through my window in my room once, and then like other guy's like, oh, my second cousin was killed by, and we're all just like, we just got here, like. So one of the things I like that I kind of keenly noted by observing this is that you had moderates on the Palestinian side, you had moderates on the Israeli side, and you had extremists on the Palestinian side, extremists on the Israeli side, and you could kind of generally imagine what that would sound like. The extremists on the Israeli side is like, no Palestinian state, they need to prove to us before we give them anything. On the extremists on the Palestinian side is like, no, it's all Palestine. And then, the moderates are like, no, two-state solution, we can get along. So one of the things, though, you kind of realize is that the moderates, when they listed why we should be moderate, they listed as their motive for it the fear that the extremists on the other side would be successful. So the motivation to be moderate is kind of a fear of the extremist on the other side. And I didn't really find, I found that, in my opinion, that's a vital flaw as to why there's no peace today, because the people that want moderation are not motivated because they love their neighbor, because they really want moderation. I'm sure some of them are, but they're really motivated because they're scared that the extremists are going to be successful. Essentially saying that in order for moderation to exist, you need to have extremism, and that's not going to work out because you just need to, people need to have a fundamental understanding of each other rather than a fear, Anyways.
And I just disagree with Omar a little bit on the last comment on the extremism versus modernism. And this is honestly the spirit of the olive tree, honestly. When you speak to people there, I think there's a general kind of idea where, survival of both communities is dependent on compromise. And to be compromising, you need to be moderate. So I think when I talk to a lot of people who were moderate, they understand that. They realize that they both have the same interests in mind. They both want to be able to send their kids to school without fear of them not coming back again. They want to be able to build on their land and to have a farm without it being taken away from them in 10 or 15 years, So I think a lot of the people, when you're talking about the different political opinions, I think it's throughout the land where you're at, your personal experiences, your family's experience, how long you've been there, what you've gone through personally, whether you're Arab Christian or Arab Muslim or Arab Jew, what it might be, it's all different. It really just depends on your experience, who you are, your background, and I honestly spoke to people who had very differing experiences, and that shapes their reality and their political disposition.
Yeah, and I agree with what Shiru said. And also, when we were in Jerusalem, we met with Yitzhak Frankenthal, and he is a founder of a support group called the Parents Circle, which is a support group for people and families who have lost loved ones due to the conflict. And he, I think, is a self-identified Orthodox Jew, and he mentioned that in his community, he kind of got cold shoulders from people who are really close friends with him because he was willing to work with Palestinians who have also lost loved ones too, to show that, yes, I could be an Orthodox Jew, but I could also work with the Palestinians because we've all lost people together. And I think it's really important that whenever we see something like that, that we support people's decisions to do what they want to do or their own approaches to dealing with the conflict.
You learned so much about Jerusalem in Ohio still. Is there any question you have about Jerusalem?
We're open to questions from you guys.
My name's Jay Hunter, and some of us are currently enrolled in a class this quarter called Living Jerusalem. We are reading a history about Jerusalem, Karen Armstrong's book, Jerusalem, One City, Three Faiths. I was wondering, do you have any advice on what we should try to discuss in class or anything that you didn't discuss in your meetings before you took a trip that would be beneficial to us?
Jerusalem is a lot you can discuss. I just throw some words at you. If you don't care, forget it. Different between the green line and the red line, talking about partition plans, talk about East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, jurisdiction, why do people vote, why do they don't vote, what's the self-identity, why have some people in Jerusalem who are Palestinian or Arab have a different basically citizenship status than others, why is Jerusalem special and still the same, what's the future plan for, the capital. I mean, I could rattle down like a million things, but I mean, there's so much, I'm getting my PhD, doesn't make me smart, just make me more read, but it doesn't mean that coming to this, again, being there's a lot of stuff to learn, but it's not just stuff to learn, but it explains a lot of the dialogue and the approaches people take, especially when it comes to Jerusalem.
One quick thing before Tzvi says something. If you're talking about Jerusalem specifically, I would encourage you guys to look up a paper that was done by a guy, I'm going to say this slowly, Pinchas Meidan Shani from the University of Windsor. It talks about different shelf agreements about Jerusalem currently that are viable, relating to a third-party intervention, those sorts of things. I think, to look at what's happening right now and what both sides, both Palestinian, Israeli, and also Jordanian, are looking at concerning Jerusalem.
I think you should learn, I'm Jewish, so I can tell you about the Jewish perspective. You should learn how many times Jerusalem is in the Bible, and how many times we pray for the direction of Jerusalem in Judaism, and how many times the Jews went back to Jerusalem. If you want to learn how important is Jerusalem and in Jewish life, and how much we care about the place, and that's a good start to know about the Jewish perspective. Probably in Christianity and Islam the same. Learn about the religious perspective. How come we went back over there century after century? Jews went back over there from Yemen, from Spain, from whatever. They went back with all the dangers on the way. They went back to Jerusalem.
I would say focus on periods of time where there have been flourishing, religious, intellectual flourishing in Jerusalem, and try to, because those times have been the normative state, and the exception are the times of conflict, which don't last that long usually. And so just Google it, look at some books, but just, I can't, I'm not that intellectual, so I can't suggest any books, but I'm sure Professor Google, if you ask him, and just Google times of peace, ask him politely, times of peace in Jerusalem, and just focus on that, and ask questions and try to analyze what made it so peaceful. Who invited who back? Who invited Jews back throughout history since the Sassanids, since the Persians, until the Common Era? Who invited the Jews back? Who invited Muslims? Who invited Christians? What context did these times of flourishings take place? And focus on those and try to contextualize that to today, and see if we can make that happen today.
Okay. You guys don't have any controversial questions?
Well, here, not just...
Maybe we'll ask the audience here.
Do you want to go back to your audience, or there's one more question here?
No, why don't you guys take one more question, then we'll talk to Cerritos College.
I can't say it's controversial. I'm just curious. Everybody there has a specific identity with Judaism, Islam, Christianity. But while you were there, did you encounter any problems for your nationality being a group of Americans in a country where not everybody likes you? Did you have any problems with that?
I have something to share. Okay, I absolutely love Jerusalem. Jerusalem is one of the most amazing cities that I have ever visited. But, okay, I guess I did have that whole, Americans, I don't think I'm arrogant, but I guess I could be. So I guess I had that, I'm American in a different land, I know about you just like you know about me. And we were shopping in, we didn't have that much free time, but one time we had 3 hours we could go shopping in Jerusalem. And I saw this one product that I really wanted, and I know that they're sold here in the US. So I asked the shopkeeper, excuse me, mister, how much are you selling that for? And he told me a price, I think it was 85 shekels. And I was thinking to myself, 85 shekels? I could get this in the States for $10. And he was like, well, if you want it, go back to America and get it then. And I was like, wow, well, I think I'll do that, thank you. No, but I didn't say that to him out loud. I just thought that. I don't think you should say anything like that. It's like culturally insensitive.
My experiences with just the people on both sides, I think when they know that you're American, this was around the time of the election, so we went to a couple different places in Israel and in Palestine, and people are really keen on to what's going on politically in the United States. So you had people who were like really gung-ho Obama, both on the Palestinian side and Israeli side. And it was ironic that there was 2 pizza shops, you guys remember, that had like Obama like all over their windows, and you talk to him, you're like, Obama came here last week, and he came right to this restaurant, had pizza with us, and they were really interested, and they knew about what was going on in America. And I think when you're an American, you're there, they assume that you know everything that's going on with the conflict too. So when you're there, they just assume that you're an expert kind of in everything that's going on. So they won't preface anything with you. They'll just go into it, and they'll go into these conversations, and you'd be like, I think I know about that. Yeah. I think I'm okay. I think I understand what you're saying. And they just assume that you know everything just because you are American about the conflict, because for them, I think the conflict is such a big conflict in the world that they assume that everyone is always watching what's going on. And while the people on the stage are very interested, I don't think the majority of the American population is very much in tune to what's going on with the conflict. So I think that was a little bit ironic.
I want to say what Sally later found out was that 85 shekels was actually $7. No, I'm just kidding. So there you go, proof that we really are American. No, I'm joking. No, that's not true. It's actually like $11.50 or something. Sorry, but no. I mean, yeah. I think that we, kind of get the impression sometimes that the rest of the world doesn't like us, and the world doesn't like us. But I would say though that that I felt that the only time it was really disadvantageous to tell people that you were American is when you were haggling in the streets of Jerusalem. That's a bad idea. They will take advantage of you, and you have to haggle for at least like 10 minutes to get a good price. But I mean, one of the things that surprised me actually was the like how much you were really welcomed. To be honest with you, like the times when we were just like walking or hanging out or going to get coffee or whatever, and you tell people you're from America, that like there was like seemed general good disposition towards you. And actually one time we were walking in Ramallah down the streets or was it Hebron? Yeah, and there was some Arabic guys, and they were like, we were walking down, I could understand Arabic, and they were saying, look at these guys, a bunch of Westerners coming. And then they were like, and then when we walked by, they were like, God bless your people, God bless your people, like God, like, but and I mean I understand the culture. That wasn't like code for like screw you all. That was, they were actually saying God bless your people, and I was like, wow, look guys, God bless your people. But then I did. I think that the other thing that, like, for being an American, it's not really so much you're going to get heat for being an American, but really, like, when you go into parts which are less advantaged, like, don't have as much opportunity as you live in the West, you're obviously, you're from the rich West, then there's going to be a little bit of, envy looking at you like that. When I was taking a cab with me and Samira, who you saw in the video earlier, and we were in Bethlehem, she left her watch near the Nativity Church in a mosque, and I had to guide her back and take a taxi cab, and the taxi driver was asking me all these questions, and he's like, so Omar, and he's like wiping his head because he's sweating and it's Ramadan and he's fasting, and he's like, how do you like America? And I was like, it's good. And what am I going to tell him? Like, oh, I have great opportunities. I go to a wonderful university. It's probably a lot better than here. And he was like, you like it? And I kind of just invaded the question. And then he was like, how do you like this land? And I was like, how do I answer this? I was like, this land is the most beautiful of land. And then he's like, so the land is good, but the people are not? And I was like, oh no, that's not what I meant. The people in the land. So they're like, you have to have cultural sensitivities, but I think that in general, there isn't anything that incredibly like hostile towards you for being an American. And if anything, in Israel, you're a hot foreigner. So for any guys that want to go Tel Aviv clubbing, that's what you do. Talk with the thickest Californian accent.
I just want to comment on that real quick. I think.
So Ali, tell us about what you did.
I'm actually married, so I'm not looking over.
What?
What? The girl.
I'm married too.
I don't have to defend myself.
Sometimes.
I'm innocent. I think when we watch the news and we watch, especially like our media culture, our videos, our movies, we hear this, we assume that the Middle East Muslims, they hate America, and that they death to America, right? The chant, death to America. We see that all over the place, and a lot of right-wing conservative groups push that. They try to project that image of the Middle East in order to dehumanize them. But going there, I mean, I've spent 5 weeks in Pakistan in 2002, right after 9/11. I spent over 2 months in Yemen. I spent 2.5 months in Damascus, Syria, the axis of evil, right? It's supposed to be the focal point of evil in that region, Syria. Just before the trip, I spent 2.5 months there, and then I met the group in Israel. And when you meet people and you tell them you're from America, one of my weaknesses is I'm honest, so I'll be straightforward. I'll tell people I'm from America, and they're very happy and they're delighted to see that you're from America, and that they don't necessarily hate us. They don't at all, actually. What they don't appreciate is our foreign policy. And because we're a democracy, we vote our government into office, and we have a say in our government. They feel that some of them assume that we have somewhat of a responsibility because we have a voice in this country. And so we've put these people into power. How could we be so stupid to put some of these people into power, right? And that's what they don't like. They don't appreciate our foreign policy because of stuff like Iraq. Now we're all of a sudden it's like, oh, we shouldn't be there, right? It's such a bad decision. But what happened on the eve of an invasion? Everybody was behind it. Everyone's like, let's go do it, Yeah, forget these guys. Iraqis, 100,000 dead, 200,000 dead, forget about it. We had sanctions before that. 500,000 children died because of the sanctions we had. And nobody cares. And so that's what these people are afraid of. They're afraid of our foreign policy, not of us. They love us. They love American culture. They want to be more American than I want to be American sometimes. They dress more American than I do. And so that's what we have to understand. And we have to understand that it's not us, it's our foreign policy. And that we as Americans have to be more cognizant of this. And we have to be more active in putting smarter, more intelligent people into office. Like us here, we can run for office, and we should do that. We should get politically active, and we should change this discourse that's currently Obama's trying to do, I guess. So that's what we have to be cognizant of, is that they don't hate us, they don't hate Americans, they just don't appreciate our foreign policy at times.
Maybe it's a disappointment in us rather than a hate.
Yeah, there's any more comments here before I think at this point this would be a really good time for a round of applause for our guests here. And the reason for this is some people have jobs, and sometimes you see people filter. And I do want to let you know that I'm grateful to a couple people. Bernice Watson in the back. That was not Bernice, but anyway. But Bernice is putting on this show here, and 3C Media, which ships out the show so people can really listen to the message that you have here today, has granted us extra time, and they do that when they think that there's a real hot topic, I mean a good topic, and so we have this big opportunity. But I got a feeling here, I sense that you guys were looking for controversial kind of questions, or we've been covering for 3 weeks, a month in my global studies, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and we've been going this in great depth. So why don't we have some students here who would like to ask questions. It's a unique opportunity. We want to seize the moment here with our guest here. Just introduce yourself and ask away.
Hi, I think it's really cool. You guys went over there. It's just amazing. I like how you said it. You need to feel it, taste it, hear it. That's definitely true. I mean, I have to say, I know a lot of people that really don't know about the situation. Like you said, this room should be filled. I mean, I go ask my parents. They wouldn't know. They just see things in the news, but they really don't know what's really going on and stuff like that. And my question is, like, when you guys were over there, did you guys feel any resent, or you guys like felt bad? Maybe saw something that made you feel like there's you need to do something else to help them, or was it more like a lively city like it is here? Like, yeah, there's conflicts and stuff, but yeah, you see people like still together and stuff, and like living like a normal city.
I've been there for 9 years, and I've made both Israel and Palestine my home. And it's not like what you see in the news a lot of times, because you only see the conflict. It's really bad in a lot of areas, but compared to a lot of other areas in the rest of the world, there's, you know, comparative issues here. It's people live their lives, and yet it's horrible that that's become norm, that there's become this sense of this is how life is, because it's such a long sustained conflict in a sense that people have just accepted that as what's normal. And so you've got an entire nation on both sides that are living in post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's just normal for them. For children to wet their beds at night is normal. For people to have to go into the army and to serve, that's normal for them. And have to do this, things that normal people like us don't have to ever face in our lives. So in one sense, Ramallah is hopping. You know, you've got underground clubs and people are going raving and doing all kinds of things. And Jerusalem is hopping, and Tel Aviv is one of the coolest cities in the world. And yet, there is constantly this undercurrent where the craziest stuff's happening. And how can it live side by side and exist and breathe and be at the same time? It's like this paradox. And that's what's interesting about that region. Because everything you said is all true. It's happening and it's not.
Okay. Other questions here for people that want to pass global studies with me? I thought I'd just throw that out there. Oh, hey, Michael.
Hi, my name is Michael. You mentioned about having to shift your paradigm constantly. And we're just here in Norwalk, you know, we don't really have the opportunity so much to go travel and cross borders so much other than like past San Diego or anything. How do we keep our paradigm shifting? How do we keep switching our mindset so that we understand?
Don't take everything that your professor says as gospel. No, sorry. Seriously. This is one thing. This is what college is about. You know, a lot of us go and we want to make a change, and we want to be Gandhi, and we want to do something. But the thing is that we can't sit there and just take one person's opinion that we respect and make that it. We have to force ourselves constantly to read and look at every side of the spectrum, and like Ali said, to challenge where our personal sensibilities lie and flip it, and constantly look at all sides of the spectrum. Then and only then make a decision, because you can't. If you just read one perspective and you just stay in your comfort zone, that's not real. You gotta keep looking at all different perspectives and don't fear knowledge. That's how you do it. You go to Professor Google, like Ali said.
But be careful about Google.
I also think for everyone that's watching in the audience here, we met with someone who was former intelligence for Israel, and he came together and he's created this website. It's called bitterlemons.org. And what he does is he brings together academics from both sides of the spectrum, and he gives them a topic to talk about. And usually it's a hot topic of discussion for that week, and they'll write an academic essay on it. And that has their opinion, and it comes from both sides, and these are very well connected, very well respected people. So I think if you want to continually keep updated with what's going on and kind of get an idea of what both sides are saying, you should definitely check out bitterlemons.org.
Go to Compton. Honestly, no, go to Compton. Even Paul was mentioning it. Go to Compton for the day. How many of us have been to Compton? Okay, the questioner, have you ever been to Compton? Okay, so go to Compton, hang out with people who are different from you. Hang out with people, make it a goal each and every day to say hello. Come to Irvine. You know, maybe come to Irvine, hang out with some people in Irvine. What was that? But just hang out with people who are different than you, and try to feel life as they feel it. Try to perceive life as they perceive it. And make it a goal each and every day to say hello, or just to mix it up with people who are different. And I'm not saying this superficial. I'm not saying this to try to promote some peaceful coexistence, utopic, paradigm. Just do it. It's simple. Just say what's up. You know, you see someone who's different than you, go up to them. They'll make fun of you maybe for a little bit. and then just hang out with them, you know, say hello and try to feel life from their perspective, and that will give you a paradigm shift. And travel, get out of the country. Get a passport and just go, just travel, get out of the country and go somewhere abroad.
David, if you come up to a microphone so they can hear because it's other people listening, not just here. Yeah, right.
And I'm going to get in ahead of Omar and just say, when you do these interactions, think more about turning your conversations into learning conversations, asking questions, instead of what I think we're most programmed to do is persuade other people of our opinions. But always, you know, seek out, like everybody said, seek out people you know are going to tell you something maybe you don't believe in advance, and instead of avoiding them, go for it and ask them with great sincerity what it is that makes them think that way. And little by little, you might find them asking you questions about your ideas, but always be thinking about learning rather than persuading.
They very, very much believe in where they're coming from, and they are not going to change that. And yet, they're trying to understand the other person's psyche. And this is something that, you know, even people, if you saw Ahmadinejad when he came to Colombia and how much hoo-ha that caused, and people were going to protest it and not protest it and this and that. You know, honestly, to go and listen to a person to understand where he mentally is coming from, it's like playing a chess game. For anything, you need to understand whether they're your opponent or they're somebody you want to understand. I don't think that has anything to do with your personal values and having to change where you come from in your belief. I think it just makes you a much more clever individual in life, learning how to play the game of life. So.
And the question of open-mindedness, I mean, the thing with this group is the way to go like a little detail. When we went on a trip, we had like a couple of things we agreed we would do. When we go to a speaker, we had many, you know, to settlers and supporters of Hamas and this, I mean, you know, and some people have really emotional speakers, some more like calm and whatever we're doing. But we agreed not to try to call each other out in front of them. We agreed we're using it really as an educational to ask questions with the speakers and then have our discussions, our different opinions and discussion with each other in this group. So the idea is really in terms of open-mindedness, you know, is you cannot, I mean, even if you say I'm open-minded, you're probably not in some parts. I mean, to be honest, I mean, you know, everybody of us, I mean, there's nobody who's just open-minded for everything because it means you don't even believe in anything, you know, and that's even not open-minded. Whatever, not getting complicated here. But it's just, in a group like that, the only thing we asked for is that you were willing to listen and, you know, that people were not saying, oh, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do that. You know, that we agreed we going through this whole thing together and we speaking to all of these different people and we listen to all of that. We don't have to agree. And this is the main thing, you know, you can listen to a totally different opinion. You don't have to agree. You don't even have to go back and say, oh yeah, there were some valid points. You don't. You know, we had evenings, people were saying this was all whatever, you know, that was not the way we wanted it, and I think it totally doesn't believe, and that's fine, you know, but it's just still, it's important to listen to these different aspects, and that's the open-mindedness, I think.
What I'm trying to really see is the coexistence. You know, there's Israel and there's Palestine. How do they coexist, having that opposite, you know, type of belief and political ideas?
I mean, Shen just said they don't. I mean, right now...
she just said they already do.
Oh, they do. Oh, yeah.
One thing, I'm afraid to say anything and then have Shannon come and say, no, I was there for 9 years, you're wrong. So I want her to go first, kind of. But I would say one major setback and drawback in that area, or barrier, is the separation of the two populations. Like, most Palestinians aren't allowed to go into Israel, and most Israelis aren't allowed, or all Israelis aren't allowed to go into the West Bank and Gaza. And so how do you create a situation like this where you have different people from different faiths, different backgrounds meeting together when we don't have the means to meet each other? And I think maybe there's a political agenda behind that to separate the people and create this kind of separation, right? Perhaps there is, I don't know. Shannon's been there for 9 years, I haven't. But the same thing occurs here on campus, you know? You have the Latino club, the African American student union, the Muslim student union. But where is there a club that comes together that encompasses everyone's you know, needs and desires? And basically, we all have the same needs and desires, right, on campus. We want, and living here in the United States. So a big barrier in that region is the fact that they're separated and that they can't meet each other. Because I think people in high levels of authority realize the potential, the disastrous potential when people come together, is that they'll actually come and understand one another. But they're kept separate, they're kept apart. And I think that's why we have so much misunderstanding, is because we never talk to one another. And they don't have the means and the capacity to do that yet. And I think in order to have that happen, you have to separate, you have to do away with the separations and allow more fluidity. Because there's a wall, there's a fence, there's this, that, there's checkpoints. People can't get across, they can't talk to one another. And we can point fingers, but the fact is they just can't talk to one another. And they're not mad at each other for other reasons. I mean, I'm not going to go on, sorry. I'll just share.
I think Ali is absolutely correct. I met when I was there generations of Israelis and Palestinians who've never seen, let alone spoke to one another. You know, they've gone their whole entire lives without meeting their neighbor, which is just even like sometimes less than 100 miles away, if you can think about that. We're huge. Like our state is huge, you know what I'm saying? Think about the size of, I don't know, like Orange County sometimes, like from one end, let's say Seal Beach to like Irvine or something is a distance sometimes between these people, these populations. But because of, you know, checkpoints and because of the fence or the wall, whatever you want to call it, they haven't been able to talk to one another. There's no communication. There's no interaction at all. So that in and of itself is very disappointing, because you're thinking, well, how is there supposed to be peace when these people haven't even seen each other? And when you haven't seen each other for your whole entire life, and you've just heard stories, and when you've seen suicide bombings, when you've seen this and that, what are you going to think about the other side? Are you really going to like them? Are you really going to try to draw like a human face? I mean, I would hope that you would, but honestly, human nature, if someone's told you from the very beginning that you've lived in this refugee camp, and the reason you're in this refugee camp is because an Israeli moved into your grandfather's home and took that home, what are you going to think? Are you going to be very happy? Are you going to be angry? You know? So there's organizations there. One Voice is an organization that I'm very much in love with, and One Voice tries to bring young people together on both sides. There's just as many Israelis as there are Palestinians who are part of One Voice, this organization. And it's a grassroots, bottom-to-top movement where they try to bring dialogue between young Israelis and young Palestinians so they can talk about these issues and they can talk with each other, period. And what they try to do is the same kind of programs for Israeli youth as they do for Palestinian youth. And they try to empower these young people to become the change. They empower these young people to change their communities, to go up and to become these elected officials who can then talk with a voice of reason, you know, and to talk with a sense of understanding, because they understand. There's, like at Hebrew University, for an example, you know, you're going to have this tension either way. But just the fact that they're speaking, just the fact that they're talking, is a step forward. So when you have these organizations like One Voice working towards bringing these people together, whether it's through the webcam, whether it's through the telephone, I think is a step in the right direction. And with a conflict of this scope, change isn't going to happen overnight. You know, any meaningful change that's going to happen is going to take generations for it to actually take root and to develop into, you know, two states that either live simultaneously next to each other, or one state that's all together. Who knows what's going to happen, but it's going to take a long time for there to be actual coexistence or continued coexistence, because there is already.
Something about coexistence in the Middle East. I wasn't there for 9 years. I was there for 30 years. So perspective, like 30.
Oh, I was going to say, dude.
Dude, yeah, 60 years. No, so like, that land is like the holiest place for the Jews. It's very holy for the Christians. It's very holy for the Muslims. And as long as one of the religions believe that it's better from the other two, and you believe that your prophets are the last prophets, and your truth is the last truth, and the other ones are like wrong, we're not going to move anywhere. Coexistence is going to start when you believe that your God is your God. That's all. If you want to believe in a Jedi Knight, good luck for you, but that's cool. No, I'm saying that's good for you. I'm not saying that my God is better than your Jedi Knight or like whatever you want to believe. But that's like the only solution, believing that your God is your God, that's all.
And this is not related to the question, but if you guys are interested in getting involved with One Voice is currently doing an international poll initiative to survey different universities and different communities of what American people think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and specifically also what do American students think that they can do to help the peace process. You can speak to me afterwards. I am currently heading the poll initiative at UC Irvine, so if any of you want to get involved to bring it to your campus, that'd be fabulous.
And your phone number.
Yeah, you can throw that out. If I can just interject, I'd be remiss here if I didn't mention that we have a little get-together, a little reception after. Frank, can you just give us a little detail here? Because I have to be on TV for 30 more minutes, and I'm going to have to sing or something, or dance or something. Is it not? Well, did you guys hear the?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I think we've lost our other. I think we heard that, and I'll repeat that. Anyway, yeah, I could hear you fine. I think the microphone wasn't on, but I think we could hear you fine. All right, I guess it's my job to kind of step in here a little bit. As I mentioned before, 3C Media has given us an extra 30 minutes of time, and I don't want this to be burdensome on anybody. I think we have a unique opportunity. And if everybody leaves the stage, I will be here by myself on TV. I don't know what I'm going to be doing there to try to keep up the time, but this is the opportunity, you know, to ask some of the questions. We could pick up the pace a little bit. You don't want to miss off. Carl. Okay.
Yeah. Since all of you have come together, obviously people can come together and you've been over there, but I have more of a nuts and bolts question. The maps I've seen for that are attached to the peace process and show what they call a two-nation solution, I look at the map and I see a patchwork of area. And in Parker, Arizona, they have a patchwork between the Colorado River Indian tribes and the city of Parker, where you have privately owned land mixed in with reservation land, and there's a constant competition between the tribal leaders and the city fathers as to who has authority over exactly what. So my question is, in an area where feelings are a lot more volatile than Parker, Arizona, will a patchwork map really work as a two-nation solution?
Well, as you've kind of highlighted, that patchwork, they call that well, if you're familiar with the history of South Africa and apartheid in South Africa, you find that, you know, there were kind of like patchwork countries within South Africa where, you know, certain tribes are designated to live, and they call these Bantustans. So those patchwork areas in the West Bank, they call them Palestinians, in kind of reference to that. Although I would like to say that apartheid is a politically charged term, and it's difficult in its own to draw direct parallels to those two things, because what we have in Palestine is an international conflict, and obviously in South Africa it was a civil rights issue. But this is where you're kind of now merging into the issue of the settlements and also the wall, and also kind of pertaining to the last question in terms of how much coexistence is there really. And then you kind of start to understand that there's varying degrees of coexistence. The least degree of coexistence is what you see in the West Bank, where you see settlements built directly on top of Palestinian villages, and you see walls that cut through towns. And you see roads which are built on top of each other, which start from the same place and end at the same place, but they're different roads and they're designated for different people. So the reality is that there are a lot of things about this conflict that are currently thwarting the possibility of a legitimate state existing. In my opinion, you can't have, you know, 6 or 7 big chunks of non-contiguous area which don't have any connection to each other to serve as a state. So there has to be a compromise that's going to happen on one side or the other. Either you know, someone has to abide by the rules, and I mean, Oslo certainly didn't work for us. People tend to look at Oslo and say, oh well, it failed, you know, after the Second Intifada. Oslo failed, was broken like within the same year that Oslo was signed. Rules in Oslo were not followed. So there has to be some kind of, it doesn't work, you're right, but.
I mean, you're alluding to some map. I mean, there's so many different maps. I mean, that's one of the things that we have seen. I mean, even with the same name of the same initiative, there's a lot of different maps. And I think besides the maps, it's really you know, it's the people within that maps. It's the and you know, but also when you only see a map of Israel and the Palestinian territories, you forget all the other countries around that. You know, I mean, that should be on the map as well. And then you need to kind of sign, you know, what are the relations? I mean, that's a lot of the issues we discussed. I mean, it is a conflict primarily, you know, between the two groups there, but they are related to all the neighboring countries. You know, who's opening the borders? They have a lot of internal pressures or issues and refugees, and you know, and then you talk about land swaps, and I mean, there's a lot of issues you have to think about. But I think whatever you come up for a solution, I think, and that's the issue with Oslo, you need to first of all, you know, have the people who you build the solution, you know, with, you know, being part of it. So it's not just like the smart, you know, American educated elites on both sides coming up with a, you know, solution. It has to be with the people who really have to live there, and it has to be viable, that it's really giving both sides a fair chance to fulfill the obligation of a hopefully like an international whatever, you know, agreement that will be made. And that's a big word. So within that, you know, we can discuss like a million things. But I mean, patchworks, I would agree, are different. Some patchworks, I mean, I grew up in Germany, you know, Berlin was like, you know, in the middle of another country, and there was, you know, Cold War, can work, you know, it's complicated, but I mean, if people want, and it's really done viable, you know, you can build transits, and there are ideas about tunnels and trail, you know, kind of connection between Gaza and the West Bank, I mean, which would, you know, depending how it looks like, would be important. But, you know, it's not just these kind of a technical solution, but it's like, do all the people feel represented? Is it agreed on what's happening in the whole region, you know, that people can be really integrated?
We're at a point right now where statehood isn't even, I mean, we talk about it in nice phrases, but the reality on the ground is that statehood isn't even close to being a reality, because even peaceful discussions between people that are really nice, you've got such deep-seated issues and narrative on both sides where you've got to start building upwards amongst each people first before you can start crossing the bridge to talk about that. Like, for example, in Hebron recently, I was there hanging out, and the majority of people said, two-state solution, forget it. One-state solution. That the whole idea of two-state solution within Palestine has become less and less popular recently on the ground. And so these are the sorts of things where I don't even think it's even about patchwork quilt viability, it's about viability at all. And they talk about how Americans are really, this is another question that came from people who are not there anymore. Americans are seen as being sort of meddlesome at this point right now, and I know that there has to be third-party intervention in order to make things work, but there's an anecdote where I was dealing with my colleague who is Israeli and also with somebody from the negotiations team for the Palestinians. And there was a miscommunication because the information was going through me. So the Israeli picked up the phone to the Palestinian and he said, listen, bro, this is the problem. The American gets involved, there's miscommunication. You and I talk, we know each other's language. And this is how a lot of people feel, that America and all these other third parties have really made more of a mess than help the situation.
And like, we're sitting here for an hour talking about like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There's like 6 million Palestinians, out of them 90% are Muslim Sunni, that's 5.4 million people. You have in the region 270 million people that don't enjoy rights. So let's say tomorrow we solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Palestine becomes like the Hong Kong of the Middle East. You're still gonna have 270 million people that don't enjoy rights, don't enjoy freedom. So what, are we, like, we solved the issue because we like solved the problem of like 6 million people? No, we didn't solve anything. We solved like a very tiny part of the conflict. There's like a huge problem in that region that needs to be addressed, of freedom and access like to knowledge, and that needs to be addressed also.
Vincent, please.
Hello, my name is Vincent. I'm a history major here at Cerritos, so I'm very familiar with the gospel according to Dr. John Haas up there. And
that's why you passed.
And I'll very likely be a student at UC Irvine the coming fall, as I've been accepted to transfer over there. My main question has to do with the people you were talking there with on both sides, the everyday people, not the you know, the rabbis or any of the politicians or what have you, but from the everyday people's perspective. And it might be a little different generational gap, maybe from parents and younger people. But is there a sense that this thing will ever be resolved, Or is it really more like, okay, this is just going to be the way we're going to have to live with this, for the rest of the existence? Realistically, I mean, bottom line.
Excuse me.
I can tell, like a Israeli Jewish perspective, like the Jewish people, we have like 3,500 years history, and with all that what you see on the news, for us is a relatively safe time. So our time perspective is totally different from what you know in the US. Like we celebrate Hanukkah, you heard about the holiday, that's something that happened like 2,200 years ago. It didn't happen yesterday. So when we look at stuff, maybe now it looks very bad, but when compared to our history, this is like more or less peaceful time.
I just want to, before you go there, it just shows how important the show is. Ohio's back now. They're all waving. See, I told you the show is a good show that they're staying. And to let everybody know here, my class goes from 2 to 3:15. And, that's why I wanted to applaud you when everybody was here, because people start filtering out at the end of the class and all that. But we have some hardcore people here asking questions, so please, yeah.
Well, that's an interesting relative perspectives fee, but I'm afraid my Jedi Knight says that we're going to win quite soon. No, I'm just kidding. No. Remember my Jedi Knight God as opposed to your thing. So, anyways, yeah, I mean, yeah, people are giving up hope that anything's going to happen. Right now, you have amongst the Palestinian demographics, over, I think, 60% are under the age of 25. And when the second, so basically more than the majority of the Palestinian population, within a matter of years, if it hasn't already reached that point, are going to have been born after the Intifada, which means that they've been observing this stagnant process throughout the 90s and its complete deterioration into this decade too. I don't think they know anything different. They never saw a different time. And I mean, times have changed because, the main thing that people thought was going to help the Palestinians out and was opposing the Israelis was the Arab nationalism, which essentially, went downhill after, the mid-70s and a series of lost wars. And of course, the fall of the Soviet Union, which was the last real entity which was backing the Syrian, the Arab nationalist states in the Middle East to oppose for, their military purposes, fell, and that, that sort of left them without a real supporter. And I think, though, that the hope that something is going to occur is kind of different in different eyes of people. Like right now, you have the Prime Minister of Israel is Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's advocating something kind of different than the past. He's very conservative, but what has he been saying? Well, the way to counter this problem is to target economic improvement for the Palestinians rather than statehood. So another thing, on the Palestinian side is you get a lot of people that think that this problem is eventually going to be solved through a war of demographics and procreation birth rates. I mean, the highest reproduction rate in the world is in the Gaza Strip, and I think it's almost 3% growth rate, which is, if you understand, growth and statistics, it's pretty up there. So a lot of the Palestinians. Did a robot just talk to me? I don't know what's going on. Oh, okay. Yeah, so yes, I'm not trying to compare the Palestinians to rabbits or anything, but yeah, it's growing, and so a lot of people think that they're going to win this through a demographic war. This is kind of God's way of winning the war, and that's actually for a lot of people in the modern Israeli perspective, that is a little bit scary because they look at it as being, how are we going to sustain this growing population in our backyard? And now we have an infusement of the settlements within the territories in the West Bank. What is going to happen in the future? So a lot of people think that there's going to be a population explosion, and eventually you're not going to have any choice but to have a one-state solution. That's kind of the extreme ideology. But I would say that for the vast part, a lot of people have kind of given up hope, yes. And that's why you see people resorting to supporting extremist groups.
While we were in Jerusalem, I had the opportunity to establish a rapport with some of the individuals who are helping out in the hostel that we were staying at. And through speaking with them, I learned a whole lot. One of them did have hope that, yes, like things are like, but what I didn't like is that he would always just say like, yes, like they are working on peace, but who are they? And then the other one didn't have hope, but he's a Arab Christian, Palestinian who is Israeli, so he's a Palestinian-Israeli, and he enjoyed living in Israel. That's not to say that just because you're a Palestinian and you live in Israel that you can't be happy. But he, there's one that had hope and there's one that didn't have hope, and each person is different. In Haifa, when we had a free night one time, well, in Haifa, yeah, well, we were only there for one night, but it was like Haifa was an amazing city too. We were waiting for a taxi driver, and then the taxi driver picked us up. Daniel was with me, and I forgot who else was in the car with us. And there was the taxi driver, he started to speak to us. Well, he knew Hebrew and Arabic, and he didn't know English that well. So I know Arabic fluently, and I was able to speak with him. And so he started.
I was listening.
Yeah. And he started to, ask me about America and what I thought about Israel and about, and he referred to the place as Israel. I know, like this. Some people say, like, oh no, Palestinians will always say it's Palestine. That's it. Israel does not exist. And he went on to tell me about his life story. I didn't ask him or anything, but he went on, and he said that his whole ancestry started in Haifa. His great-grandparents, his grandfather, his dad was born in Haifa, he was born in Haifa, his children were born in Haifa, their children were born in Haifa, and he has hope for the future that everyone will get along, because that life goes on and just people need to get along to live together. And Haifa is a city that is known more or less for its coexistence. You have various groups of people from all the different religions, and people get along there more than they do in other places. But it all depends on the person.
I mean, hope is a really big term. It's like this. We know it from Obama. Hope, but it is the challenge is right now that you have different generation. You have the people who have tried it, and they've, in their eyes or in the eyes of the world, they failed. And it's really hard sometimes if you're really passionate about something, and when most of them tried it, they were in their 20s, and they were like 20, 30 years old, and they pushed very hard, and then Oslo came, and now they failed. And it's really hard for them to do that. So hope for that generation is more like they're like on standby. They're kind of, we tried it, it didn't work, we don't really see what's happening, but they would join if they would see things moving again. I mean, I think the hope is, with the newer, younger generations. And the amazing thing is, even that they have grown up in all these different places, when you meet them and, engage with them and converse, there is hope. There's, they want to change. Each of them have their peace plan or their ideas how the future can look like. It's not like everybody's just like, forget it and live in it, because that's the challenge. I mean, the challenge is that for some, they may be able to live with it and kind of plan it out. For many, it's a reality. That's a different from us, like having a nice week once a year, kind of bringing in that topic. I mean, living there is a day-by-day thing. So the question of hope, maybe just me more the question of a daily reality to deal with. And I think the newer generation will try to change things, and will try to bring, and anybody, no matter how extreme or not, in the end of the day, they want to have a place where they can feel they can live, and they can feel safe and raise their family and do all of these things. So the question of hope is really, at least for me, has become much more kind of is there life? And, there is a lot of life, and I think so there will things continuously happening. I mean, on the reality, we see all these problems, but then, as mentioned at the beginning of Dr. Haas, I study Northern Ireland and Israel-Palestine, and I always remind people like that 20 years ago, we would say, or 30 years ago, we would say like, wow, Northern Ireland will never change, these Catholics and Protestants are just out for lunch. I mean, they're crazy. And today we have a peace process there that is highly praised, and have seen it, it's working out. And 30 years ago, people were saying Israel-Palestine, I mean, that's close to be solved, I mean, we're figuring it out. And now we're like thinking it will never be changed. So in my perspective, studying that, even in the last 20, 30 years and going through these different periods, hope has changed and perspective has changed quite a bit. And that's I'm always telling people, don't think it's all over yet just because of the current situation.
Just to address that question, the majority of people we met want peace. Everybody wants peace. I mean, it's a desired state. But hope, I think, is a different thing. For example, our bus driver, he was Palestinian. He's an Arab. He was Muslim. He was also fasting. He speaks Arabic and Hebrew. And one day we were out in the desert, and we were out going towards Jericho, and I stayed in the bus for a little bit just to read some stuff, and everybody else went out and kind of in the sun. It was hot. Anyway, I was sitting there talking to him, and he just looked at me. He's like, kind of upset face. He's like, "Why are you guys here?" He's like, "I've been doing this for some odd years. I don't know, 10 years or something." He's like, "I take groups every year, every week, from the West, and then as soon as you guys leave, you guys just forget, and nothing happens, and our situation remains the same." And so, yeah, people want peace. It's a desired state, but the facts on the ground haven't given them any hope. Like, they see an increasing settlement population. They see, the air raid on the self-defense or air raid, the massacre of Gaza, and these things I think they take away from hope. And so hope has to be backed up by actual change, something happening on ground that can convince people that, yes, there's hope for the future. And so in our situation, Obama was a big factor. Just the psychological factor. Things maybe haven't changed, maybe they're getting worse, but the fact that he came into office and something else happened. And in Israel and Palestine, I think you don't see that yet. I'm just gonna be frank, I don't know. I mean, I spoke with people, and I didn't speak with everyone. I'll be honest, you know what? I made the mistake of not speaking to as many Israelis as I wish I had. And so but speaking to some Palestinians, they were just, some of them weren't too hopeful because the facts haven't changed, and so that's supporting their mentality.
I think what Omar kind of said and what was kind of echoed by Ali here is, when there's a lack of hope, when there's a lack of, okay, well, what are we going to do now? That's when you start turning to something extreme because you need something extreme to shake it up, right? To change the status quo of where things are going, the direction in which things are going. So with a lot of the people that you talk to, I think the reason why a lot of people are hopeful and want to be hopeful and want to remain hopeful is because they don't want extremism to take root and to, kind of develop into a life of its own, where once you go down this path, once the majority of people are kind of going down this path, it's kind of a path towards destruction. You can't have a just Palestinian state. What are you going to do with all the, Israelis? Staying on the Israeli side, you can't just have an Israeli state. What are you going to do with all the Palestinians there? So it's one of those things where I talk to a lot of people, the majority of people want peace. A lot of the young people who I talk to, in my opinion, were hopeful, and we're looking for small short-term gains, like working towards making sure the issues of the checkpoints were being addressed. The wall is a very big deal. The wall and checkpoints hinder economic development in the region. You talk to people on both the Israeli and Palestinian side who understand this. And when you're not able to provide for your whole family, when you're not able to work, and when you're not able to have a livelihood, that's when you turn to extremism. So people understand that. So it's short-term gains. It's looking to see what's going to happen in this next year. They're not really worried about, what's going to happen with peace. They're worried about how they're going to make ends meet for that month. They're worried about how to make sure this one Palestinian village doesn't go, down the drain economically, where no one has work, no one's doing anything. So it's short-term, and that's where I think people are looking at. They're looking at short-term gains. Hope for making economic gains in the region, hope for bringing people closer together, hope for increasing dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, really small short-term things, because like Shannon said, this whole two-state solution right now is so far away for these people, because what they see every day is not at all reflective of what we think policy-wise should be happening, or from what happens top to bottom. A lot of these lawmakers on both sides are making these decisions and they expect it to trickle down. Well, it's not happening. The people are thinking and experiencing different things. So it needs to start being this bottom-to-top movement, which was a big message that I took away from this. And when I look at any hope for future peace in the region, I look at this bottom-to-top movement where you have people coming together on both sides and realizing, what's happening in the West Bank, what's happening in Gaza, it's not happening. It's not gonna go well. It's not gonna fly with me, because if the Palestinians aren't doing economically, we're not going to be doing good economically in the next, 25 to 50 years. So I think it's very interconnected, and I think more people are starting to realize that, and that's where the hope comes from, I think.
Let's say the year is 1987. You live in Gaza. You're free to work in Israel. You can be whatever you want in Israel. You can be a doctor, a bus driver, whatever. That's a reality. That was history 22 years ago. You're free to move wherever you want to go. You can go travel to Jerusalem. No barriers, no wall, nothing. Then suddenly started the peace process, 2009. After the peace process, you cannot work in Israel anymore. You cannot travel. What happened in the last time? What happened last years? So you need to go back there if you want to solve this issue. Ask the question, what happened in 1987? They started the first intifada. That's going to solve it. There wasn't poverty back in the days. There wasn't the issue of not working. People worked and were well fed. Something happened in the region. People wanted to establish their own Palestinian state. You need to solve the issue. The issue is not the barriers or the wall. The issue is the national aspirations of two different people. You have the Palestinians and you have the Israelis. You need to solve that issue. Give hope for both people that they can get statehood and have their own life.
I just, very quickly, because Bernice is giving me hand signals, and I know Bernice pretty well when she's giving me hand signals, so that means we have a little less than 3 minutes. And I want to just announce for the people who are here to make sure that they understand, this coming Monday at 2 o'clock, we have Burmese prisoners, political prisoners. Some of them have been prisoners for 7, 14, 21 years, who are talking about the student insurrection in 1988. So I just want to make sure that we get that out, especially to people who may be listening in Ohio and other places around the world. And I want to thank everybody.